Welcome to the Scale Up Valley podcast, where we bring the best founders and investors to help you scale a business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Jens, the founder and co-CEO at Kranus Health. Jens, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be here.
A pleasure. And we have almost a story behind recording this podcast that we can share when we have those kind of sessions, when we share the funny stories behind recording episodes
True.
And shows and
it was a lot of back and forth for sure to get this thing done.
But we are here for the community to share your story, and this will be an amazing episode for the ones who are following us. And for the ones who didn't have the opportunity to meet you yet, Jens, let us know a little bit more about you and how did you end starting up Kranus Health?
Happy to share. Happy to be here. Jens is my name. I guess I've always been kind of in the whole healthcare area, and I always wanted to start a company for pretty much entire life. I kind of started selling stones in my backyard when I was a young child. But I guess, what led me to found Kranus Health, first of all, it's just like briefly, we'll talk about it more later, but what we do in essence is solving men's health issues that no one talks about, right? So I think my story is kind of, I started my career more than a decade ago as a management consulting with McKinsey. Mm-hmm. And I was always advising pharmaceutical clients. And what during that time, I kind of saw lots of, issues with little patient centricity in pharma, right? Like lots of drugs get developed in labs and like the patient isn't really involved much, and there's little way of getting in touch with patients, and had many other stops, some exciting time also while I worked at Palantir during the pre-IPO times, definitely also an exciting company. And at that time we kind of blended my passion for tech and healthcare, because also Palantir does some really exciting stuff in the area of healthcare. And that kind of led me to founding Kranus Health. And I think for me, it was really clear. I want to do something with healthcare, and I want to do something with tech to really help patients, treat diseases and lead a better life, right? And what I saw is that, looked at different verticals, and what I always saw is that femtech is a very big vertical, on every VC landscape, you have like a big box with lots of femtech companies in it. And I think it's great stuff that these companies do. But what I saw is that almost no one is doing male tech, as I like to call it now.
I love it.
And that's how, given that half of the population on Earth is, of course, also men, and there are many diseases that men suffer from specifically, I decided to do something in that space. And I think that's what we've been doing since.
Yeah. And I can see that when we look to your LinkedIn, your first experience has been as a founder as well. So then you move it into management consulting. Then you have been at a very late stage, scale up as an executive, and now starting again your own company. So you always had, as you said, an entrepreneurial background on yourself, and you've been kind of learning, working in other environments, preparing yourself to what would be the idea that you wanted really to put your heads and art and hands on. That's male tech and men's health issues. And I love the slogan, solving men's health issues that no one talks about. So super well done, and that's what you use it to present Kranus Health as well.
I use it in pitches. I use it really. I think it's something which describes quite well what we do in essence. And happy to expand on that, of course. But that's what we do here.
And I'm kind of a testimonial of that, right? So the majority of our community knows that I have an autoimmune condition that was recently diagnosed, and yeah, so typically it's kind of 1 in 5 or 25%. I think that's the number of the men have autoimmune conditions. So it's a condition much more prevalent in women, but when it's a man, nobody talks about it because it's kind of a women condition. So I can relate to the problem that you are approaching here, and which is kind of amazing because you don't have only one product. You have several products to solve different problems across men's health issues. Can you elaborate a bit more about Kranus Health, what it is today, what are the products that have been launched?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. And let's be clear, I think we are on a mission to build many more products. So it's hopefully never going to stop. But the first product that we started really with is so all our products, what they have in common is that they are digital therapeutics. So basically therapies delivered on your mobile as an app, basically intervention therapies that changes the way you go about your life and many other aspects, right? And what we also have in common for all of these therapies that we're a deeply medical company. So basically we don't sell products via a D2C or direct to consumer approach. Instead, we develop reimbursable therapeutics. So we, prove that they work with clinical trials, really large, randomized, controlled, gold standard trials, like every pharmaceutical companies does, and then get them into reimbursability. So the products are free for patients and are fully reimbursed by the health insurance. And our first product, which is now basically under full insurance coverage for 40 million men in Germany, is in the area of erectile dysfunction, which is obviously, a quite widespread disease in male health. And we were able to show in clinical trials that we can treat erectile dysfunction as well as Viagra does. So that's that's something we're quite proud of, and it's really a great therapeutic option for people suffering from that disease.
From the ones who are listening, just an overview, because this is not a medical podcast, but any curiosity about kind of the comparison to those other solutions as Viagra, as you mentioned it. Is it an healthier solution, a better solution, and a more sustainable solution? The solution that
I think that's exactly. I think you hit the nail on the spot, right? So I think basically Viagra, there are pills that can treat certain diseases. We try to solve diseases without chemistry, by rather treating the underlying root causes. So it's a long-term fix. In this case, it involves pelvic floor exercises. It involves psychotherapeutic exercises to really kind of change the perception, but also change parts of physiology in your body to deal with these issues better, right? And I think just to give a very brief overview of our second product, that's in the area of prostate enlargement, which for many men and also leads to urge incontinence or the urge to pee a lot during night. So that is a very, very widespread disease, potentially even bigger than the first one that we're tackling, affecting almost every man above 50. And here we can also, again, through basically cognitive behavior therapy, through bladder training and also pelvic floor exercises, really change the symptoms that these people suffer from and help them to be better deal with that disease. And then the third product, which I can't share too much about yet because it's currently in medical development, but we're very excited about that product. It's in cancer, so basically urology, oncology. The most prevalent type of cancer among men is prostate cancer. And obviously, we're not able to cure cancer with a digital therapy, but what we do here is help men who are undergoing cancer therapy to better deal with the symptoms that they experience, help them, keep their body fit, and also provide a mental support. And there are some recent studies that basically have shown that, and I think that's really quite pivotal and important study, that have shown that people who undergo cancer therapy, they have a higher, not only do they live better if they get support during that therapy, but they also live longer. So we have a higher rate of survival by basically providing better support for men and women, in this case, that undergo this kind of therapies.
Is it correct to mention that I see that you have a much more kind of a functional medicine approach, but of course with evidence or medical evidence behind it, and in a more sustainable way, you go to the root cause of the problem, and you work also on making exercises to improve the life of those patients, but also working on the psychological reasons behind that are sometimes part of the causes of those effects, right? And those diseases or conditions.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that point. I really believe in that kind of more holistic approach in the right sense of the point. And I think that's what I love about your approach, is that you also are very based on clinical trials and kind of proving the impact of what you are preaching, right? So sometimes those solutions are being attacked because there is no medical evidence behind. But I think that everyone now is much more open, because we are seeing more studies coming and showing that those solutions have a much better impact than just giving a pill to the patient and expecting that everyone will go away.
Yeah, I think it also fits to the zeitgeist, right? Like people just like kind of want to, we're kind of passing beyond that time where you just swallow a pill for all your issues and you're still like not, people want to move away from chemistry. I think in many cases, and I just want to underline what you said. Indeed, clinical studies are super important to, provide objective results that what we are doing or others are doing is making sense. And it also is the prerequisite, which also makes sense for insurances to reimburse that therapy, because of course they want to spend the money in a way that that makes sense for patients.
Yeah, and this is also a very good point, because then those treatments will be just for a niche that is able to pay for them, and you are not able to democratize the solution to get into the mainstream, right? So and I see that we have seen in the health tech category a lot of amazing solutions that unfortunately didn't have the funding or the opportunity to prove their scientific merits, and then to be reimbursed, and unfortunately they needed to stop. And it seems that you from the start you were very careful about proving and offering to your patients the potential for being reimbursed to be treated, right? Which is quite important for the democratization. Something super important that we always talk about in scale-ups is really the importance of focus when we are scaling up. So typically when we see different products, of course we can see the focus, and you started with that. So men's health issues that no one talks about. So you are always on that category, on that focus. You are not getting out of that focus with your products, but still your company has been founded in July of 2020, Kranus Health, and you are almost doing 3 years at the end of next July, and it's almost one product per year, which is a lot. Can you give us a kind of a conservative view about the focus, about saying that you only should go to multi-product growth when you have maybe 10 million in revenue and not before that? What has been your thoughts about it?
So, I mean, I completely agree. For us, focus is super important. And I've always, from the start, we try to be laser focused on actually I want to emphasize on one product. For the first 2 years, we really did in the end one product. Now we're expanding, but now we're also a lot bigger. We have more than 70 employees. We have much more capacity to expand. And the way I think about focus is, for me, there's always 3 dimensions in the end. There's the products, there's the channels through which you go to the market,
Right.
and then there's the markets itself, or internationalization, right? So, and I think for the first 2 years at Kranus, I think the reason why we have been so successful, and we have really a perfect track record, and we have been one of the fastest digital therapeutics players to ever get a product in reimbursability covering 40 million men, is because we have been focused on one single product. And I think that was, for the first 1.5 years or so, really very important. And then what we kind of in the last year, our second to third year, what we focused more on, we did not do anything in internationalization yet. The thing what we focused then on is like going through different channels. And I think that's the way I think about this, is like you have a product which works well, and before you even do your second product or third and or go to a different market, for me, it was really important to capture the market that we're in, because it's already a huge market in it itself. Yeah. And then we scaled. So we have now 3 very important channels for us, which are, you know, like on one hand side, really doctor sales. We have a sales force that visits doctors, that educates them about our product and gets them to prescribe it. Right. We have a second channel that's working well in terms of performance marketing, where we inform potential patients about the product and then get them to see a doctor. And then we have a third product with partnerships of digital clinics that have relationships to doctors that can prescribe the product, right? And I think that's something that we've been spending a lot of time on, right, to really wrap our heads around how to get these channels to work.
Again, the old adage that we not only need to be amazing in product, but also great in distribution, and especially in health tech distribution, in any sector, but especially in health tech, it is super complex to have distribution right, especially when you are starting the company and you don't have the reputation of 10 or 20 years behind you, right? So
yeah, and I think then with the products, right, like now that we have the second product and the third in development, is that I already see that adding a lot of complexity in so many different areas of the company, right? So like when you have your second product, all of a sudden all your analytics become so much more complicated, like because you have to split the revenue you get from the different products, you have to split the patients, the studies, etc. And there's also a lot of distraction to the team. So I think even though we're 70 people, it's still not easy to focus.
But at least you still have a fixed GU, which is not adding more variables at the moment. The channels might be the same for the different products, so which is great. Yes. You are already leveraging and having an higher ROI per channel, because you don't have the same investment for every single product. You are already having kind of economies of scale. But agreed, I like to multiply, and I think that you just did a great exercise, which is to multiply the number of variables that you have in product, the number of variables that you have in channels, and the number of variables that you have in markets, and then typically you have the number of businesses that you are operating simultaneously within one business. So if you have too many variables, it becomes almost impossible to manage, right?
Right, and we're still not done, of course, with the first product, even, and like maximizing all the channels. And I think something that obviously now everyone, and I think that's a good development, cares a lot about profitability, right? So like that, getting all your channels to be unit economic profitable and to really scale within that constraint of being profitable really takes a lot of work and effort. We are planning to internationalize probably still this year, which will then be kind of adding the third layer of complexity. But we're very careful about doing that, and I think it has to make First of all, really a lot of sense for the business in terms of really doubling or tripling your size. And yeah, I'm being very careful, even with the funding that we have for it, to really not do it too early, because I think it's also quite easy to burn a lot of money if you do it too soon and not do it in the right way.
And it's curious to see, we had a recent episode about that, of course, opening a new market is a huge risk. The timing is super important. Also having the right resources, also to not trying to open multiple markets at the same time. And also we are seeing a new trend, which is that we also have seen multiple companies fail at that, but it's being a nice trend, which is to acquire small companies already with a brand in that market, but at a good price, still small, that we can leverage in order to enter the market in a better way. We know it's easy in theory than in practice, but it's curious to see. Any hypothesis about the new geographies? Is it much more about Europe, if you can share, of course, at the moment, about European domination, opening the US, or opening more exotic destinations as Latam or Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I think, look, I think in the end, patients all across the world have the same biology. So
Exactly.
We have proven product market fit. So ultimately, of course, we want to serve all patients around the world. But as you said, we have to go really one country at a time. For us, the most important thing is to have the right regulations in place that really enable a business model where insurances reimburse the products and take over the costs for the patients. So we want to keep that business model. And here, I think right now, Europe is going through amazing, I think amazing for patients of all disease areas, to amazing regulatory changes where Germany kind of started. Now France is actually following suit, offering a very similar framework to reimburse therapeutics. Belgium does it already. Denmark is quite far ahead. So we really see a shift in the regulatory side to really kind of enable these therapies. And of course, the US is also moving ahead in that sense. I think, of course, the US is a huge market, exciting, but also expensive. I think that's also clear. So for us, it's the next step will be Europe or the US. That's not finally decided, but we'll make a decision, I think, in the next couple of months.
Sounds exciting plans in both areas. Of course, the US being the largest healthcare market in the world.
Indeed.
That's another bet. But as we were discussing, timing is really important, and also having the resources to really be able to conquer the market. And it takes also some time to conquer a new market, right? So I think that's right. I also enjoy the way you are launching different products, because when a product is becoming into more a mature stage in terms of scaling up, you are kind of doing a new bet in a company that in a product that is in a starting up stage, and that might need 1 year or 2 years to get into scale up mode, and we never know. Only the market will tell if we were right in our assumptions, right?
That's true, yeah.
But anyway, it is really amazing that you have it on your own LinkedIn, that you reached a significant 7-figure ARR, which would be around 1 million plus ARR in the first
actually
year
quite a lot more
after market launch. So exactly, because 7-figure, it could be from 1 to 10, from 1 to 9.9.
It's a lot more than 1 million. Yeah, it's a lot more.
Which is super incredible. We know that a lot of health tech companies go through sometimes 3 years with very limited revenues, and especially going through the clinical studies that you went through, etc., etc. It takes an investment. It takes time to.
It does, yeah.
So which is quite amazing what you have done so far. Any tips there for other health tech founders and for other founders? How did you were able to generate revenue so quickly in a sector that sometimes we see investors complaining that revenues don't grow as quickly as other sectors or other alternatives for investment like SaaS, or a normal SaaS, let's say, because we are talking about SaaS as well.
Yeah, what I firmly believe in, and here the things are changing so quickly in that sector. I firmly believe you need to integrate into the existing healthcare system, meaning like not getting people to pay out of pocket for these kind of things, but really go into reimbursability. And I think that has been the key enabler for us, and we see revenues growing really quickly also in the coming years and this year already. And that requires, I think my tip would be, you need to be really, really nerdy about building a product that works, and then spending enough time and getting the right people on board to get clinical studies done. Because ultimately we are like any pharmaceutical company, right? Like any biotech, a biotech on average takes 10 years to get something, to get a blockbuster into reimbursability, right? And proving that it works. And I think here we can be faster, but ultimately the way you need to think about these things is very much the same. And that's why this, medical clinical focus is really important, and it distinguishes, I think, the products that make sense and work from those that don't. And that's where you also then distinguish the revenue.
Right. So let's change a bit gears, looking more for the leadership and team components of your journey. So how did you build your founding team? So what are the skills that you have in your founding team? And now you said that you have you have 70 plus people at this moment in the team. But how have you built your founding team so far?
So we have 4 founders, and I think I have myself and my co-CEO who are on the business and fundraising, business and commercialization, which you said before is also obviously very important. Right. Then I have a CTO who is building these technical products, and then we have a chief medical officer, Kurt, who is one of the most famous, I guess, urologists from Europe, who really has that deep expertise in urology on the medical side. And I think in the end, you always need a combination of commercial, you need product, and you need medical to found a successful company in that area.
And sometimes we even see that sometimes we are not able to combine product and technology in one seat. So some startups have a founding team of a CPO, a CTO, and then especially in health tech, it becomes very tricky because you need to have that medical component. We are seeing more and more startups with that medical seat plus the go-to-market seat. It becomes almost a 5-team founding team, we know how difficult it is to be able to find the right timing for all the founders to come together, and we know that it's difficult to be able to combine that timing for 2, not to mention 3, 4, or 5.
It is true. And I mean, there's obviously a lot of founders who are at an earlier stage of their founding career who then kind of talk to me, and I think that the key thing that I see people struggling with at the very beginning is that finding the right founding team. So I'm very thankful, very happy that our team found each other, and we've been together on that journey for, as you said, almost 3 years now, and really love working with each other. And then I think in terms of scaling, right? So I think what we always think about when we do founder offsites is really kind of what are the skills that we don't have, and where we really don't have skills, we need to hire someone, right? And for example, that is the regulatory area, which is also important if you build these kind of businesses. It's marketing, like very specific marketing expertise. So I think that's kind of how we went about, thinking about what kind of hires we need to be successful as a company.
Right. And we know that this transition from the founding team to the leadership team is not a easy one. It's also an exciting one because you start having more people and more specialization in the leadership team and in the next layers. But how has been this evolution, and how has been the evolution of your role as a CEO as the company scaled to 70 plus team members?
Yeah, I think actually, first of all, I think that's something that I love about founding a company, because it also keeps your own experience so exciting, because the skills that you need to, bring to the company, they really evolve over time. So even though you're working on the same topic, you're actually doing a completely different job, and that change in itself is not easy, but it's also exciting. And I think, well, first of all, you start at the beginning. Every founder needs to be super hands-on. You need to do everything yourself. And I think for me, I reflect the key challenge in getting from being a founder team with maybe 10 or so employees, where like ultimately a lot of decisions are taken by the founder team themselves, is to enable, first of all, hire a great leadership team, but then also enable this team to take many decisions, not all decisions, but many decisions by themselves, right? And I think that has a big change component, because some people might be used to really talk through every decision with the founder, and then that changes, and I really try to instill this decision-making mindset within the company, because ultimately if the people then don't do that, you become a bottleneck, and that's not good for the company, right? I think that to me was and still is one of the biggest challenges in going from that 20-30 people to 50 plus people.
Right. And typically the leadership team has 5 to 7 members, having 4 founders, and assuming that they are all still with leadership team seats, which doesn't necessarily is. Some of the founders prefer to not be in the executive team at a certain point and prefer to be more experts in their fields and support the company in other way. It is already 4 out of 5 or 4 out of 7, which is almost the majority, which again can create 2 teams, right? The founding team and the rest of the leadership team.
And that's something I'm trying to combat, right? So I really want to kind of move away from there's a founder team and there's a leadership team, rather than saying like there is one team which is more than 4 people that leads the company. And I think here, but also as a founder, you have to also discipline yourself, because you're also kind of used at the beginning to take all of these decisions. So it is something where you also need to then tell yourself like, okay, I trust other people to make decisions. And even though sometimes you might not agree, sometimes you might not even agree with what is being decided, but then you also, I think, need to take a step back and let other people get into the driver's seats in certain area, which isn't easy. Trying to do my best, but definitely also a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially it's separating, and sometimes that's why the executive team is also a good term, because it separates that the founders don't need to be executives or don't need to be taking care of executive topics when they meet. And I think it's also important to keep their relationship, to keep them united and passionate about the purpose and the reason why they started the company and why they are together to solve this big vision, and have much more discussions about that. We still have the culture that we want. Are we still passionate about it, right? Are we still having fun making this happen? How is our relationship? And let the executive team topics for when the founders are in the executive team, as a member of the executive team, to be able to decide more stuff related to the business itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And something also quite unique that we are seeing more and more happening, and we know why. It's very lonely at the top, and being just a single CEO is super an hard job. So if we are able to split responsibilities at the CEO role, it will be much less lonely. So how has been your experience with the co-CEO model? How do you split responsibilities? Any tips for other founders that are thinking about applying a co-CEO model to their companies?
Yeah, I think so. So first of all, I think the most important thing that is required for this to work well is that you and your co-CEO, like so my co-CEO Thilo and myself, we know each other for 10 years. You have to have very deep trust and a very strongly established relationship to really work together and trust each other blindly. And I think if you have that, then it can be really a good model, which it is also in our case. So, but yes, first of all, I think some principles for me is like, that's something we spend also time on from the start. You always have to have very clear split in responsibilities that also need to be clear to your team, right? Who do I approach for which topic? Right. And that is something that I think we did quite well. And we continue to review how we split our responsibilities as the company grows and as as priorities might change. So I think that's something that is super important to get done well. And maybe the other thing is that when you get that done, I think then you make in the end really good decisions, because sometimes the most important decisions, of course, we talk about it, and then getting a different perspective on things and being able to kind of play back and forth thoughts, ultimately, I think in most cases leads to better decision making.
And in very uncertain environments and a lot of decisions that you don't have data to back them up, to back them up, and you need to come with your intuition. It's good when you have two people to be able to, also take ownership of the responsibility. And those are kind of the founder or co-CEO decisions. Is the decisions that you can't really take based out of the evidence that you have as a leadership team. Someone needs to take the lead and make a decision and test it out and then correct it if it was wrong, or take the credits if it is right.
But I think
usually it's more give the credits to people when we are right and take the responsibility when we are wrong, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, I think what helps me a lot in terms of decision making is to really split between reversible and non-reversible decisions. So the way we work is that reversible decisions, they should be taken quickly. So we move ahead, and then like if it was a shitty decision, well, that happens, and then you kind of reverse it and then go forward again. Non-reversible decisions, such as, I don't know, I mean, every decision in the very long term is reversible, but like there are some decisions like, do you go to France or US or these kind of decisions that have a huge impact on the company. These are the decisions that you really need to spend time and talk about. And then the reversible decisions, they just need to happen. I think that's generally true for the entire company, and trying to instill this kind of mindset in people's minds.
Moving to kind of more of the fundraising front that everyone likes to talk about. So you have raised last June 7.2 million A round, right? And before also a small pre-seed and the seed round. 115K in July of 20 and then 1.2 million in February of 21, if I have the data right from Crunchbase. In that sense, any tips that you'd like to share or about your unique story? We know that every single story is quite unique, but any patterns, any tips that are already with you for the upcoming rounds that you'd like to share with other founders?
Yeah, I think the first learning is indeed, if you ask 10 founders and VCs about how to approach fundraising, you get 11 different answers. Exactly. So it is, in the end, I think everyone needs to find their own way of doing this. And then some do it, I guess, better than others. But there are some topics that are found to be universally true and that in my experience are very important. The first one is really the personal relationships are so important to your new investors. So I think in the end, if you invest in a startup, there's so much uncertainty. So you really have to have the trust in the founder team that this team is able to deliver. And the way you build up this trust, I think, is through relationships. So what I always try to is kind of be in touch with investors, even, you know, if they're Series B or like late stage investor, if they're kind of interested in your company, like keeping that conversation open, so that when you go into fundraising mode, you will not start from scratch, but rather, you know, you can really build on an existing relationship. And that was, I think, in particular during COVID times, right, in which I founded Kranus, it was hard because we weren't able to meet.
I was not thinking about it.
Yeah, there was a lot of virtual meetings, but still, you know, that works. But I think now, as we go back to more normality, it's important to spend also in-person times to build up this relationship. And that's my first learning, and I think the second one is, and I learned that throughout the multiple rounds I did, is I think you really need, like, either you're like, when you decide to fundraise a round, then you need to be completely focused on that, which also means you need to step back from everyday business and make it a competitive.
That's when having a co-CEO model helps, right, as well.
That helps indeed, because you have basically double capacity, right? But like, when you go into this process, you need to make it with very clear timelines, also for potential investors, and this way, you know, like, also make it a competitive process, right? Because from my experience, investors will always have an incentive kind of to drag on the round a little bit if they feel they have the time, right? Because they can get more information, I guess, about the company. So that's I think the second point from my point of view: a very clear timeline, very focused process.
Yeah, and you said that you were already 1 year after, so July of 21, already with 1 million plus in revenue, which would allow you to, especially in the US, to make a much larger round, seed round. So did you go on purpose to not raise so much money and raising a 1.2 million round at the time? And I remember that at the time, the market, we were still through the different waves of the pandemic. We never know when was because sometimes we have a lot of hype and other times a lot of fear, right? So the pandemic was a kind of crazy waves of excitement and depression. So we never know where you are in the cycle, but were you also kind of did you try to be capital efficient in the capital that you raised, and be careful with valuations? Because we are seeing some founders now, unfortunately, struggling with the valuations that they were able to raise before the markets at this correction, right?
No, I think we've been, especially if you compare it to some of the US big players in the industry, like Pair Therapeutics, etc. Like, we've been way more capital efficient than these kind of companies. And I think also, look, when we raised our seed, we basically had a product, but we had no reimbursability. So we had also basically at that time zero revenue. And I think that's kind of typical. If you are in healthcare, it's the same, right? Like, a biotech company will have no revenue for 10 years. So you need to raise a lot on the product and the vision that you have for that product. I think now that we basically have this very strong revenue and we have the first products in the market, of course, our next round will be an interesting one.
Okay. I can see, given the momentum, I'm expecting a very large B round. But trying, especially depending on the ambition that we were talking before, what would be the international expansions, the new products to be launched, etc., etc. Amazing. Any final thoughts before we go to the last segments? Jens, any other topic that we didn't discuss that you'd like to highlight to other founders that are going through the same journey that you just did until now?
yes, we talked about it holistically. I think well, it's to me, it's an exciting time. I love what we're doing. I personally love being in that role, and I just can recommend to anyone who is on the verge of doing this to do it.
That's great. So let's go to the last segment of the show. Jens, if you would have the opportunity to have a coffee with yourself in July of 2020, when you founded Kranus Health, what advice would you offer to your younger Jens?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is just to do things and don't overthink. So I think at the beginning of my founder career, sometimes I'd really tried to think through things from many different angles and try to come up with the perfect solution. And I think instead, the way I try to do these things now is to accept that anyway, things are going to change so much in the next couple of months that you would probably have to throw away 90% of what you decided anyhow. So I think focusing on that is important. Oh, and eating healthy. I think that is also a good advice to my younger self.
I love that point, right? Not becoming the first and the second. I was talking more about the first, which is not becoming too attached to our convictions and our beliefs, right? So having more an iterative mindset, and especially as founders, we are convicted, we are obsessed about the problem and the potential solution for that problem, about the purpose, about the vision, right? That's why we are able to be resilient and keep going when life and business sends us big problems and big rocks in our direction, and we stay there, and the majority
that happens many times
go away. And what are you the most proud of on your journey so far?
I think it's building up a team of people that is really mission driven. I think that's what I really love about Kranus and the people that we have, the many people that we have. I think we really attracted people who are passionate about our mission of solving men's health issues that no one talks about. I think this is generally a great advantage if you build a health tech company compared, let's say, to some B2B SaaS backend product that might be commercially very exciting, but that people don't understand that intuitively. And I think that's something I'm really proud of our team.
Yeah, and coming out to this podcast or whatever it is, and being able to share your mission and purpose, I feel it's an honor, right, to be able to contribute and do.
I'm very humbled by that, indeed. Yeah.
And worst advice ever received?
I think first of all, you get a lot of bad advice along the way, and it's not always easy to distinguish bad advice from good advice. Exactly. I guess the worst advice ever was to learn playing guitar. Parents kind of advised me to do that, and I just suck at it and practice for many years, and I'm still not good. And I think I had to learn that this is definitely not an area in my life in which I will ever excel.
Again, we come back to the previous reflection, right? Sometimes we need to skip something because as founders, we have this obsession that we will fight until the end. We will go through that, right? And, and we were discussing that we rescheduled this episode several times, and when we were starting, now we can tell the story. Power went off. That it happens maybe once in a decade at my home. So and we are still here. And let's go to the resources. Favorite book, business or non-business, you decide.
Favorite novel, I love Armored Towels. Beautiful writing, storytelling. It's kind of, he really absorbs me into a different world with his novels, and I think to me that's very relaxing.
Amazing. And favorite movie or series?
First answer, I guess Breaking Bad, probably still is one of the best written series of all time. I loved it. And a little bit less known, maybe Genius. It's a great Netflix show that kind of follows famous people throughout their life, Albert Einstein or Pablo Picasso, and really kind of shows it from multiple angles, so also like the flaws that these people had. And I think that's it's quite insightful.
Well, I need to check that out. I love biographies. So,
Yes.
and favorite podcasts, excluding this one.
I think it's that trick question. No, I think
I know that's now you don't have too many options.
No, I think the all-in podcast with Shamat, Jason, Sachs, and Friedberg. I think that's a very especially for founders. I think I think they discuss really important topics and have a quite high level view on the market.
Just the name is All In or All in
Yeah,
One?
All In. Yeah, All In. Yeah, it's something the one podcast I guess I listen to every week.
Super interesting. Also entertaining, right? So the dynamic,
I mean, sometimes
pace.
the guys tend to talk a little bit too much, but I think it's it's very entertaining. Yeah, I like it.
Because sometimes we also want to learn the stories, but also to make it I think that's a difficult part in any of these shows, right? Is to make people have fun and learning at the same time, because we already have so many boring things to do in our days that if we are not having fun as well, it becomes difficult to keep following the episode. Jens, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for making the time, and wish you all the luck for the next chapters. And you are always invited to come back to share the progress.
Thank you, Mike. It's great being here.
And to our community, thanks for being on that side. We keep bringing you the best of the best to make your life a little bit easier as you scale up your business. See you soon and keep scaling.